I really like physical touch, but I found that for me, getting to be really particular is important because when I'm particular and directive of my touch, I get into my body because I'm noticing the moment to moment
What
what
does this
works for
sound
me and
like?
what I
This sounds
want.
really hot. Are you
It's
like,
super
I
hot.
want you to touch my right inner thigh.
Yeah, just like this. With it's no slower. A little hot. Oh yeah, right there. That feels so good. Right. So being very directive, but also revealing when something feels good.
Hey, I'm Jen, host of the Open Bedroom Podcast, where you'll find topics of sex, dating, relationships, non-monogamy, and more. I'm glad you're here. Let's dive in. Welcome back to the Open Bedroom Podcast. This might be a familiar face for you guys. Back on episode 117, which is about, I don't know, almost 100 episodes ago, we had Dr. Alison Ash on. We call her Dr. Allie. Dr. Allie is a trauma-informed intimacy coach and educator at Stanford University, lecturer, author, and founder on TurnedOn.love. As a sociologist with a PhD from Stanford, Dr. Allie has a comprehensive understanding of the complex societal challenges that often lead to unsatisfying and disempowering intimate experiences, which we will be talking about today. She designs workshops, courses, and retreats and offers individuals and couples coaching to give others the tools to be able to cultivate and sustain nourishing emotional and sexual intimacy, which we will cover at the end of this podcast. So hang tight if you want to learn some more from Dr. Allie. Today, we are going to be covering a conversation around navigating different libidos, which I've never had covered in 200 episodes on this podcast, which is crazy because it is so real. So, Dr. Allie, do you want to give us just a quick update in the last year? Like, what's been going on with you? What's new? What have you been doing that's new and exciting? Is there anything like on your heart you're like, oh my God, I just like learned this thing and I want to talk about it?
Oh, what a question. Well, my husband and I, who works with me, he's also an intimacy coach and educator, have been building out a bunch of offerings for neurodivergent folks, folks with ADHD and folks on the autism spectrum. That was his work for a couple of decades before we met. And so now we're kind of bridging his former work with his current work. And that's been really fulfilling and not a topic that I was as familiar with before we started working on all of these offerings. So it's been really great to geek out on that. I've been really enjoying that.
So, just a quick note, one of my top episodes ever is making ADHD your bitch through BDSM. We should absolutely have your husband come on either with you or solo to come talk about just this whole concept about ADHD and relationships, because I know it's really important. And it was one of my top episodes for years. So, we'll just like put a pin in that, have him
I'd
come
love that.
on.
Yeah,
Okay.
seed planted.
Okay, great. So
Yeah,
outside of that, what else is going on? I know you just moved. You've become a big plant mom.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yes. And my husband and I have been on a really intense fertility journey, which has had lots of ups and lots of downs and lots of hopes and lots of tears. And I think, all the topics, right? Whether it's ADHD or what we're going to talk about today with differences in libido or fertility journeys and how that impacts intimacy. I mean, these are just so prevalent and relatable, and also topics that I think we don't talk about enough in society. And when we don't talk about it, it's so easy to feel shame around it or isolation. And I think I've just been on this really big personal and professional mission to talk about it more because I want to create a space where folks know where to get resources and support. And I think the Buddhist concept of the second arrow really feels true here for me, where the first arrow of the wound is all of the complications and heartache around fertility and infertility. But then that second arrow on the wound is all of the judgment and the shame and the isolation and the self-blame and all of that stuff that just exacerbates the wound. It makes it so much harder to heal. So how can we remove that second arrow to create a little bit more space to be with the first original wound, which is just how hard fertility can be for so many of us and how that impacts pretty much every area of our life.
For real. And I've been listening to so many podcasts. I think because I'm in this perimenopause part of my life. And so I'm like on this journey about hormones, and I've joined Pilates, and I'm growing my hair gray, which I'm actually about to color because I'm like, I feel really young inside. I don't want to look like I'm 60 yet. But anyway, that's its own conversation. And in every single one of these podcast episodes, I am so blown away by the fact that they don't teach us your peak fertility is like 25, right? And we're in our 35 to 40s going like, okay, I'm finally ready to have a baby. I know this is not what our topic is about, but it seems like maybe we need to circle back around at some point and talk about this because
Yeah.
no one tells us.
Let's plant a seed because I also
Okay.
think it's important to talk about how fertility journeys impact intimacy,
Mhm.
emotional intimacy, sexual intimacy, how hard ovulation sex can be, how much pressure there can be. And actually, I think that there is a through line because I know for a lot of couples, challenges around fertility impact libidos. And here we're talking about differences in libido, and I think it's great to have a whole podcast episode focused on that, but I think this would be a really juicy follow-up.
Okay, cool. All right, so we'll circle back to that. Okay, so let's talk about differing libidos. I always say to people, opposites attract, and that includes the bedroom. And I know for fuck sure that's what happens with us. Like, I am actually more like the guy. I'm the one that's always like, "Are you ready?" Like, Scott, I came back from Pilates today and he opened the door totally naked in the garage, and we just had sex this morning, and I was like, "Oh. Oh, are we gonna go again?" He's like, "No, I've got to put my testosterone shot. I need to go do that, and I'm about to take a shower." Like it's so funny, like the different levels that we're at. And I hear so much frustration from coaching clients that I've had, friends that I have that are like, I just either my husband wants it all the time, or I don't. Like I want it all the time, and he doesn't ever want to do it anymore. And then now we're aging, and so there's all of that and the hormone thing. So talk to us about what to do.
Well, let's just first say our libidos are not static through our lifetime. They are impacted by so many physiological factors and so many situational and contextual factors. So, grief, burnout, exhaustion, so many things can affect our libido. For some people, stress can increase their libido. For a lot of people, it's a libido killer. Um, Performance anxiety, addictions and habits, all sorts of things. We could go on and on about libido blockers. I do a lot of teaching around them because I think they can be so pervasive. Um, you are also pointing to the fact that some people, while there is a variation in range in fluctuation in our libido over our life course, there are it is also true that we kind of inhabit certain ends of the libido continuum. So some people may always have a higher libido and other people may consistently have a lower libido, and that can be impacted somewhat, but maybe not so much that they move from one end of the spectrum to the other. Um, and so I think it's helpful to talk about this because I know personally and I know professionally, I've worked with so many people that feel like, God, what's going on in my life? I used to have such a high libido and I feel broken, or I'm grieving because I feel like I've lost a part of myself, or I feel disconnected from my erotic self, or this part of me that used to feel desire and easier access to pleasure, right? And that's real because we may not be looking at how our life, the conditions in our life have changed, and that there's actually something more systemic. And also, of course, another big factor that impacts our libidos is whether or not we're in new relationship energy, right? New relationship dynamics happen the first year and a half in a relationship. Not every relationship, and of course, there's a lot of variation. But when we're in that new relationship phase, our brain is flooding our body with oxytocin and dopamine, endorphin, serotonin, norepinephrine, all of these chemicals that make us feel horny and like we're 16 again, and we can be ready for spontaneous sex, and I'm horny, and then we have sex and it's really great. And then we start to normalize it as though that's how things should be, or that's what being in love should feel like, rather than realizing that this is a temporary phase in relationships. And when that phase is over, for many individuals, not all, but many individuals, our desire starts to become more responsive rather than spontaneous. So, meaning rather than I feel horny and then I want sex, it's I need the conditions to get into my body and to start to feel pleasure. And then as I'm feeling pleasure, it builds and it unfolds, and then my desire comes more online. But if you're waiting to feel horny to have sex, because that's what used to work for you, then all of a sudden you're not having very much sex.
Oh my God, I'm so excited to have this conversation today because literally last night at dinner, Scott and I were talking about this, and we're in a long-term relationship. We're about to actually finally get married after being together for 4 years. And
Congratulations.
thank you.
Yeah.
And, I just don't think it's fair to expect that you are always going to be turned on by your partner. I just don't think that that's even humanly possible for an entire lifetime or for decades of being with someone. So it feels like maybe we should spend some time talking about that responsive desire. How do you cultivate it? What are some tools that you can have in your toolbox that can get you ready, especially if you're planning for sex, right? One of the things Scott had said last night that was interesting is he was like, I don't want to feel forced to have sex with a person that I'm not, turned on about. And I was like, you realize this is going to be me in like a decade or two. You're going to be like, I'm not turned on by you anymore. I'm
Well,
gonna
let's
do as
not
much
side.
Pilates as I can until then. But I mean, like, there's going to be a point in your life when you're 80 or 90 and you're saggy and you're like, it doesn't matter how much Pilates you do and how much Botox you get. Like, you're just going to get old. So, how do we keep that, and maybe it's like a workout that you have these practices and you have these tools in place. So, that you can work on that responsive desire and it becomes something that it's easier to reach for. So I hope you have some answers because
I
I just
have lots of
like,
thoughts.
I don't want to
Yeah.
get old and you not be attracted to me anymore.
Hi, I'm Dr. Alison Ash, intimacy coach and educator and the founder of Turn On Love. Whether you're single or partnered, the Sexual and Emotional Intimacy Skills Master Course will help you have hotter sex and more fulfilling relationships. In this 8-week online program, you'll get science-backed tools, practical exercises, and a supportive, judgment-free community. Can't make a live class? No problem. Recordings are included. Right now, tickets are discounted, so don't wait. Join us at turnon.love and level up your intimacy today.
I think I actually just want to start there, which is, in our culture, in Western culture, the images of sexual, sexy, attractive women that we see are younger women.
Oh,
And what that means is that I think people of all genders desexualize older women. But that is absolutely not necessarily aligned to people's lived experiences. Meaning, I know many women who are in their 50s, 60s, 70s, even 80s, who are having some of the best sex of their life, who
mhm.
are feeling themselves, who are empowered sexually, who know what they want, who are no longer shy to ask for it, advocate for it. And there's something very attractive and appealing about that. And I know so many men in hetero relationships that find their partner so attractive in these phases of life. But we don't talk about it. And I think that creates a deep sense of insecurity for women. That once I go gray, or once I start to have wrinkles, or once my body fat starts to shift and change, and it's harder to lose the weight, and whatever it is, that I am no longer attracted to my husband. And yeah, okay, so I've worked with some couples where maybe that is true because he's very steeped in these ideals of what beauty should look like, and there's a lot of strong conditioning there. But I've worked with even more couples where that's not the case. And so I don't want anybody to be signing their death warrant. Like I reach 50, I reach 60, and no longer my partner's not going to want me because that's not necessarily the case.
Awesome. Okay.
Yes. Yes. And then, yeah, how do we create responsive desire? So I think what's really important is to realize that we do not necessarily create our lives to be very spacious. I live in the Bay Area of California, which is a very intense place to live. There's a lot of really rampant tech culture, which means people are working crazy hard. There's a lot of income disparity. It's a very expensive place to live. There's a ton of amazing events going on all the time in multiple parts of the Bay. Almost every single human I know, personally and professionally, is going at max capacity all the time. And I don't think that's just a Bay Area thing. I think that's true for a lot of people, particularly in big cities. What that means is there's not much spaciousness. There's not much room to breathe. There's oftentimes a lot of exhaustion and burnout. And personally, when I'm burned out, the last thing that I have space for is to be in my body
Mhm.
because my body's not actually a comfortable or pleasant place to be, or I've deprioritized it because I have a crazy to-do list I need to get done. And what that means is that I'm disconnected from pleasure
Mhm.
and I'm disconnected from uh, really a deep sense of embodiment. And when I want to be intimate with my partner, we have to really create spaciousness. Like, I don't have access to quickie sex very often anymore because I'm in go mode. And I know for so many parents, I'm in parent mode. I'm really focused on tracking somebody else and taking care of other people's needs. I don't have the awareness of what's happening inside and that I deserve to actually prioritize my own internal experience and wants and needs. So for a lot of folks, it's actually how do I shift my mentality from being externally focused to being more internally focused? So one thing that I think can be really helpful is having certain rituals or certain traditions that you do that shift the dynamic from work brain or parent brain or whatever it is, caretaker mode, into sensual mode. So taking a nice shower or bath. I really like taking a shower with my partner and we'll like bathe each other. Or one of the fun, silly things that we do because laughter is really helpful is we'll put body soap on our bodies and then we'll soap each other up with our bodies instead of a loofah, which is just bonding for us. Having really good lighting, really good music, some yummy scents, having a space that's visually appealing. One thinking about it in terms of scaffolding. How am I going to get from where I am, which is not in a sexy mood, into a sexy mood? And one of those scaffolding structures is to create sensory-based pleasure, which can make room for sensual pleasure, which can make room for sexual pleasure. Because any pleasure awakens the pleasure centers of the brain, and sensory-based pleasure is inherently embodying and it's not agenda driven, right? And I think that's the thing is I never tell people to schedule sex. What an awesome setup to create so much pressure for yourselves. But schedule time for intimacy, schedule time for connection. And we could talk lots about what that will look like. I have so many ideas.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
when
Yep.
you're scheduling time for intimacy, it's just about, okay, let's create the conditions for me to feel connected to myself and for me to feel connected to you. And then let's see what happens.
How often, because I know you're not scheduling sex, how often are you scheduling this? It's almost like snuggle time, right? Like you're like, the intention is just that we get close and that we, feel good about our bodies and maybe we're clean and maybe there's snacks and like how often are you intentionally putting that on your calendar? Because I'm sure you have to calendar it with the kids and the work and the Bay Area and all the
That's
events
right.
and
A hundred
yeah,
percent, right? If you schedule time to go to the gym and hang out with your friends,
yeah.
schedule time to be with your partner. When things are going great, once a week.
Okay.
When life is totally at capacity, maybe once a month or once every other week. Um, and the reality is this. At a minimum, my partner and I will schedule time for intimacy, and maybe it's like we got time for half an hour. That's what we got. Or maybe it's like, okay, we're gonna really try to carve out more spaciousness for us. A weekend is a really good time. Let's set aside a few hours. Or maybe once a quarter we say, let's go away, just you and I. Let's have a couples retreat, not like a group retreat, but
Right.
like we'll go to an
Yeah.
Airbnb and
There's a
just like have
spa, there's something
exactly.
happening, and you're not having to
Yeah.
work and clean and
Yes.
make
So you
dinner.
can have different amounts of time to invest in.
I love
And one of the commitments that we've made to each other is that when we have an intimacy date schedule,
that.
no matter what, we show up for that intimacy date. I get really chronic headaches. So if I have a headache or one of us is stressed or we got in a conflict with our family or friend or whatever it is, and we don't actually fully feel available for intimacy, we still show up and we give it 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever we can, because we're honoring the commitment to each other and we're honoring the rightness of the moment. We're attuning to what's available. We're taking pressure off the table. And one of the things that is so important for this is a concept that we teach our clients called the intimacy bank. So let me tell you about that. Imagine that every couple has an account in an intimacy bank. And anytime you have any intimacy at all, whether it's emotional, physical, or sexual, whether it's 30 seconds or 30 minutes, you're making a deposit into your intimacy bank. And that's enriching the overall intimacy of your relationship. And it's making future sexual encounters feel more accessible and authentic and juicy and vibrant. And one of the reasons why we believe this concept is so vital is because so many couples will feel like if we show up for an intimacy date and we don't have sex, or one of us doesn't orgasm, or whatever the goal is, it's a failure. And then that actually makes it harder to show up for intimacy dates because we don't want to feel like a failure, or we don't want the disappointment or the conflict or the resentment or the rejection that can be born out of that kind of experience, or it just feels like too much pressure. But instead, if you can say, we showed up for an intimacy date and we got naked and we had lots of skin to skin contact and we shared sweet things with each other, like, yes, what an amazing deposit in the intimacy bank. There still may be some disappointment because you would have loved to have penetrative sex, but it reframes these experiences that were previously thought of as a loss into a win. And all of these investments do enrich the overall intimacy. That's not just BS, that's truth. And when there's an intimacy in accepting what's available, appreciating and showing up and being present for what's available in that attunement process, in the welcoming what is. And so I just think that that's so vital and a game changer.
Okay, I want to talk about responsibility of fulfilling yourself and or your partner. So, one of the things I'm hearing in this process that you have of scheduling just the connection time, and then if something happens, great, and if not, no pressure, and then you have this intimacy bank that you're constantly being mindful of. I'm making his favorite coffee. He's making your favorite dinner. He's remembering to get your favorite creamer from the store, whatever. I don't know why this is all food related. I think because it's just after lunch and I'm thinking about food. But as a high sexual, and I do want to talk about erotic blueprints because I have some questions for you about that. But as a high sexual, what I have had to learn over the years is that I can't expect sex from my partner, that I can't expect him to fulfill all my sexual and orgasm needs, you know? And so I'm finding if I have my own self-care practice, then I really can come to these kind of intimacy dates. I don't know if that's what you are calling sensory or sensual dates, intimacy dates.
Mhm.
um, I can come filled up and I met my own needs. And then I can be more mindful of like, well, what does he actually need? Like, so Scott, if we have a conversation around erotic blueprints, he is a super high sensual and also needs a lot of like connective time with me. So he wants me to be present and be around and hang out with him. Even if I'm doing my own thing, I got to be like in the same room. And then he wants a lot of touch. So I make it a practice every night before bed to like scratch his back and love on him. And I've learned over 4 years that this does not lead to sex. Like this is me filling up his intimacy bank. And but it's vital for me later when I am like, okay, it's time, you know. Then he's like, he's ready for it. So anyway, I don't know that. I guess that was my own, just I wanted to put it 2 cents in because I can think of a lot of people that are probably listening and going, well, then when do I get fucked? Like when do I get the sex? You know, and you're like, well, this is like a long-term play here. You know, you're not
Mhm.
on a tit for tat. The other thing I wanted to ask you about is just kind of how does this play into the overall erotic blueprints? Because, you know, while yes, I think we're wired differently in terms of libidos, right? I think we're also wired differently in terms of like what does turn us on. And I wonder sometimes when we're saying like, well, I just don't have a high libido, I'm just really not interested in sex. is that because your partner isn't coming to you, or you don't even realize how you're wired to be receptive to that connection and that intimate time? So I'm going to throw that back at you and see what you have to say.
So much to say. I'm like
Okay.
going through my mental Rolodex trying to pick like what are the heavy hitters. Um, I think one of the reasons I'm going to come back to your question about what works for people, but before I do
Okay.
that, I want to hit why are some people just not interested in sex?
Okay.
I think part of that is because a lot of folks feel like they have to have sex for their partner. It's my womanly job, wifely duties. That's some old school narratives,
It
but it
really is,
still really
isn't
does
it?
impact some people. Or for guys in heterodynamics, my masculinity, my sense of manliness is dependent upon me providing and being sexually competent. And if I don't want to have sex, something's wrong with me because we've conditioned men to believe that they should always want it, always be
Right.
available for
Be
sex,
ravenous
right?
all the time.
Totally. When folks are having sex, when they don't want to be having sex, for whatever reason that is, they're going to start to resent sex. They're going to have a negative association with sex because they're enduring something that doesn't feel good. And sometimes it's actually not just, I'm having sex when I don't want to be having sex. I'm having the kind of sex I don't want to be having. And so then they're enduring that.
Mm.
It doesn't feel good, and I'm just going to do it anyways because this is what my partner wants, or this is what it feels like is available to me, or I feel shame to ask for something different, or I'm emotionally caretaking them by not asking for what I truly want because I don't want, I'm afraid of how that's going to land for them. So when you start to have sex that you don't want to be having, you're going to resent your partner, you're going to resent sex, you may even start to resent yourself. And sex no longer feels like it's for you or about you. And of course, yes, it's not exclusively about you, but it has to be about you somewhat. You have to be able to center your own self in your sexual experiences so that you're able to receive, so that you're touching in a way that feels pleasurable and good for you. The best sex is sex that's pleasurable for both parties, or if you're in a group sex, all parties involved.
Mhm.
That's what makes sex really hot. And so oftentimes when I'm working with couples where there's a really disparate libido or one person is just like, I would be so happy to never have sex again. Okay, yeah, maybe, asexuality is a real thing. Or, there are some people for whatever reason, they're completely content not having sex. But oftentimes I just want to at least explore what would it be like if you got to have sex on your terms? And
Mhm.
what would it be like if you actually just reconnected with your body as an instrument of pleasure, not even with somebody else, having a self-pleasure practice? And I say self-pleasure, not masturbation, because we think of um, self-pleasure as exclusively masturbation, which for some people that might be too far of a leap. What is it like if you create a sensory rich experience? You take an extra long bath and you use this yummy bath smelling soap and you have a loofah and you just give yourself extra time with the loofah and you just enjoy your body and you caress yourself and you give yourself a really good scalp massage and you just really allow yourself to feel pleasure. I think that that's so important. And so I think that there's all sorts of libido blockers, which I've kind of touched on a few in the beginning, but I also think there's this overarching dynamic here of how the beliefs that we have around sex and how that can make sex not enjoyable for folks.
Can I ask you a question about asexual folks? Because
Sure.
clearly I'm not, and all my friends are pretty much like me because that's how we are, right? We're like magnets to people that are similar to us. But do you think, like, have you seen in your own practice that asexual people they can allow themselves to feel pleasure? It just maybe isn't penetrative or isn't in the sexual realm? Like, uh, I mean, is that possible, or is it something where it's more like a disorder? And I hate to ask that, but I'm really curious because I
It's
have
not
no
a
idea.
disorder, it's an orientation.
Okay.
And there's so many different ways of being asexual. So there are some asexual folks that will masturbate. There are some asexual folks that are romantic and love physical affection.
Okay.
There are some asexual folks who will want to have that with some genders or some folks, but not other folks. So there's 1,000 ways to be asexual. And some folks have been asexual their whole life. Some folks are asexual in phases of their lives or and sometimes there can be some trauma at the source of it, but I also think that that's a bit of a misconception that people are asexual because they're traumatized.
Okay.
Some people just are asexual. And I really like to think of these things as a spectrum. So you might have somebody who's like what we would say, air quotes here, hypersexual, extreme high sex drive. And then there are some people over here who may be asexual, meaning that they just don't have access to a sex drive. There's no desire for sexual pleasure. But that doesn't mean that they can't experience or don't appreciate sensory-based pleasure or even potentially sensual pleasure
Thank you.
or self-pleasure.
Yeah, thank you for outlining that.
Yeah,
It's always fun to learn something new, right? Because I don't
totally.
know. Okay, sorry to derail us, but okay, let me
Good
pop you back
detour.
into the world of erotic blueprints, which I've done lots
Yes.
of episodes on and read Jaya's books, and I'm part of their group. And so, like, what's your take on all of that with all the clients you've seen over the years?
So I don't really use the erotic blueprint as a framework in my coaching practice,
Hmm.
but what I do think is really important is exactly what you're pointing to, which is the fact that different people have different things that turn them on, and not just turn them on sexually, but get them in their body, have them feel connected to themselves and connected to their partners. This is maybe also in addition to the erotic blueprint where the love languages framework
Hmm.
can be really resonant for some folks, right? And I think it's so important to explore what works for you. For me, because I can have a really hard time getting out of my head, um, I like a little bit of everything. I want to feel emotionally connected to my partner first. So maybe we'll do some gratitudes or some affirmations or reminiscing about some really sweet, yummy moments or some hot sex we've had or whatever it is.
Hmm.
I really like physical touch, but I found that for me, getting to be really particular is important because when I'm particular and directive of my touch, I get into my body because I'm noticing moment to moment
How
what
does this
works for me
sound
and what
like?
I
This sounds
want.
really hot. Are you
It's
like,
super hot.
I want you to touch my right inner thigh?
Yeah, just like this. With it's no slower. A little hot. Oh yeah, right there. That feels so good. Right? So being very directive, but also revealing when something feels good.
And how
For
hot is that for
me,
your partner? Like that would super turn me on if my partner was like, fuck yes, right there. That's hot. Do it
yeah,
again.
the revealing enjoyment is so important.
Yeah.
And also, my husband will share with me, sometimes it feels a little confining to be when I'm super particular and directive. And he knows that when he gives it to me exactly how I want it, I
Hmm.
get more receptive. And I don't, my particularity wears off as the experience unfolds because I'm more in my body, I'm more available to him. As I'm more in my body, more and more things feel good. So I
Hmm.
don't have to be as particular. And so he's like, okay, I'm going to give you exactly what you want right now because I know it will open you up. And then I can be a little bit more in my creative mindset of like what I
Mm,
want to do to you.
fun.
Hmm.
It sounds to me, and I mean, I've already had you on, so I can already tell too, just from across Zoom, but like you're very embodied anyway. Would if you're listening and you don't know what that means, it means like Dr. Ali knows if you breathe hot air on my left upper chest, clavicle, whatever, like I'm gonna go crazy. I'm assuming if you're in Pilates class, like you'd be following in perfection because like you know exactly how to tilt your pelvis 40 degrees and like all these things. But when I'm in class, what I'm realizing is like women are really embodied. Not everybody, but it feels a little bit more natural for us, I think. And I don't know if that has to do with like being pregnant and having a baby in you, and all of a sudden you're all aware and you're like, oh wow, it's not just. I don't know if it's that or if it's ballet class, and all of a sudden you're very mindful of how you're doing your feet and your, body positioning. But if you're a man listening to this and you're like, I can't even imagine what this process is that she's talking about with this like slowing down and like being particular about what I might want. How do you have any suggestions or advice of kind of how to get in that space?
So many. And what I will say is embodiment is a skill. Like any skill, it's something that every human can get better at with proper instruction and practice. And there's a lot of folks of all genders who have a hard time being embodied. And in fact, I am very embodied now, not all the time. As I say, I live often in my head. I'm a workaholic, so that's not really conducive of me always being super embodied. But for most of my early life, I was very disembodied because I've had chronic pain my whole life. So for folks who have had chronic pain or gender dysphoria or body shame or survivors of abuse, if your body is not a pleasant or comfortable or safe or pleasurable place to be, you're not going to be in it. And I think there is a gender dynamic because being in your body is considered soft and sensitive. And so men can be shamed and conditioned out of being embodied because it is thought to be feminine, which that's just obviously total ludicrous. Um, but that's the case. Or for really academic folks, again, referencing tech culture, but this is not exclusively that. But if you think of the stereotype of a tech person, the stereotype is that they're not embodied. And the reality is that people who are very intellectual academics have gotten a lot of praise and validation and thus momentum to invest in this more cognitive approach in life. And sometimes that comes at a cost of devaluing the wisdom of the body. I say we speak three languages. We speak the language of thoughts, which comes from our brain, and the language of sensations and emotions that come from the body. And all of these thoughts are all of these languages are interrelated. There's a mind-body connection. The sensations that we feel are a result of the emotions that we experience. Certain emotions live as certain sensations in our body. Our emotions create certain thoughts. Certain thoughts create certain emotions. If we only speak one of those languages, we're actually handicapping ourselves from being able to have more wisdom, more self-awareness. And when somebody can be embodied, they, yes, have more access to what would feel good and how that changes from time to time. But they also have access to an embodied sense of their yeses and nos, what their boundaries, limits, and capacities may be, an easier time to attune and co-regulate with other people, because that happens when somebody's more embodied, more ability to be intuitive and to read social situations. There's so many skills that come from being in their body. If you are not very embodied and you want to become more embodied, what I highly recommend that folks do is they start to scan their body for any sensations that they notice. And one thing that I provide my clients with is a long list of sensation words because language helps to define our reality. What's the difference between clammy and cold or weighty and heavy, right? There are differences, but if we don't have the language, the variety of language, it actually makes it harder to discern subtleties of differences between different kinds of sensations. So I work with my clients to become more familiar with the sensations in their body, and then I have them do various embodiment exercises. Anything could be an embodiment exercise, by the way, doing the dishes, walking, taking a shower. If the intention is to notice how are you feeling in your body while you're doing that exercise. If I'm taking a shower and I'm thinking about my to-do list, not an embodiment exercise. But if I'm in the shower and I'm feeling how the water and the loofah and the way that things smell and the temperature and all of that, it's embodying. And so, can you notice what sensations you're feeling before, during, and after? And the more that you do these kinds of exercises, the more you're training your body to notice your mind to notice what's happening in your body. Embodiment is a form of mindfulness, actually. But your attention, your focal point are the sensations and the emotions that are happening in the body.
I want to continue on this thread and ask how you feel about medicine slash drugs. So I've
Mhm.
had several girlfriends over the last few years that heavy cannabis users, even some that play recreationally with some drugs, to get into their body. And I'm curious how you feel about that, especially as you just gave us some examples of how to become embodied. I think for a lot of them, they have severe ADHD or they had trauma in their life. And so again, like you said, it's not safe to be in their body. It's not a safe, happy place to be. And so if you can kind of numb out, then it's easier for them to, I think, find the access to be a little bit more embodied. And so I'm curious, I guess, how you feel about that and if you feel like it's numbing or hurting the process, or is it a tool to use to find some embodiment? Throw it back to you.
Join us in Sonoma, California for our 3-night, 4-day sustainable intimacy retreat in April. You'll explore practices to move through libido blockers and cultivate more turn on and pleasure. Or go at your own pace with our on demand course, accessing the same tools anywhere, anytime. Learn more and reserve your spot at turnon.love.
Yes, and right. I think medicine and ceremonial drugs or whatever it is can be very effective. Um, and it could also be dissociative and disconnecting, right? And oftentimes that's an issue of quantity and frequency and all of that. But it can cut through the noise. It can overcome inhibitions. It can do all sorts of things that can be really helpful. I think in an ideal world, if folks are finding this kind of medicine to be really helpful, how can you use it intentionally and how can you use it as a pathway to be able to develop other pathways and resources to be able to become embodied? Because you're not always going to be able to do that substance, or sex may feel very different on different substances or sober, or the level of intimacy and connection you might feel with your partner can be impacted by the substances that you're on. And so I like to think of it as, okay, I had this profound experience on a substance. I know I'm capable of that. Rather than thinking I can only do it on that substance, what's it like to be able to try to get there in other ways with other avenues? The sex toy industry, by the way, is also an incredibly profitable industry because it's very effective. There's a lot of smart people working on some pretty incredible sex toys. For a lot of folks, that's a great way to cut through the noise and to overcome some of the resistance, not resistance like a no, but the blocks that we can feel that can just make it feel like pleasure's out of reach.
Mhm. I love that idea. Okay, so we've spent a lot of time talking about responsive desire. Like we've been talking to the lower libido, I'm using air quotes, person in the relationship. Let's flip the script for a minute and talk about if you're more wired like me and you're more wired for sex and you're wired for penetration and you're the partner that's frustrated because they have the higher libido and the higher desire and they're partnered. Of course they are with someone with a much lower libido typically. What are some tools that you can give them that might help with, I don't know, calming or meeting or encouraging their lower libido partner to, how do we match more, either come up, come down? I don't know what the answer is. I'm going to let you answer that, but I want to talk, let's talk to them for a few minutes.
Totally.
Okay.
I think it's helpful to have a self-pleasure practice to be able to attend to your own pleasure so that you're not only reliant on your partner to get off. I think that that's really helpful for a pressure valve and letting some steam off. I also think a dynamic that happens very often when there's mismatched libidos in a dynamic is that you get into a rejector pressure dynamic where the person with the higher libido is tasked with initiating more often. The person with the lower libido rejects more often because they're not there. And then the person with the higher libido feels increasingly more rejection and resentment. And the person with the lower libido feels increasingly more resentment and guilt and pressure. And so this dynamic can get pretty entrenched for couples. And so that's part of why I introduced this idea of the intimacy bank and intimacy dates because it helps people get out of that dynamic. So for the higher libido person, it's how much can you really welcome intimacy of all kinds? Yes, maybe you really want to get fucked super hard by your partner in this really, particular kind of way. Great, I celebrate that. And what are all of the other ways that you can actually let yourself be nourished, not just fill up their tanks, but realize that there's more ways to fill up your tanks than you may give yourself credit for?
Mhm.
And to try to get out of that pressure rejection cycle and to be able to create a little bit of spaciousness for your partner to move towards you.
Hmm.
And I think that it's so
Okay.
important. And it's actually really healing for the higher libido person to get to feel pursued and not to always be the
Absolutely.
pursuer.
And it's like, look at the sexual maturity that you're building. I listen to a gazillion podcasts all the time, and one of them was talking about, It's almost sexual immaturity to constantly be like, I just need to have sex. I just need to have, like, you're just using this as a way to get off to either move stress or maybe there's a little addiction to it or whatever it is. And I love what you're saying. Like, there's so many ways to reach and touch and find intimacy with your partner that isn't I can't hate, I know you keep using the word penetration. I want to use like penis and vagina, but that vagina on vagina, whatever it is that you're using, that's not just getting totally naked. And I
That's right.
love, I love that you've several times mentioned the shower, like just being together and lathering your bodies up. And we've incorporated like nice gritty salt scrubs to like add
Mm.
extra textures into the shower and all that yummy scent. Gosh, you could even like add a little candle if it was safe in your, I don't know what your shower looks like, but like, there's so many different ways to make that a super sensual and yummy experience too. Okay. Do you have any other ideas outside of that? I love that.
Yeah, I think more skin on skin contact is
Okay.
so helpful. And I think what happens when you have an entrenched pressure rejection cycle is that over time, physical affection starts to get taken off the table because the lower libido partner doesn't want to lead the higher libido partner on and have to have them make an attempt and then they say no and then they deal with the disappointment. And so they'll just stop moving towards connection at all. And so, actually, one thing that I do, and I know I'm speaking to the lower libido partner for a moment, but I'll encourage my couples to take penetrative sex or whatever kind of sex feels like so much pressure for the lower libido person off the table for a little while. Because then what that means is physical affection and skin on skin contact and making out and all of these things that had just stopped happening start to feel safe again.
Yeah.
And couples get a lot more creative and explorative.
And it feels
And
like such a fun game because you're going to just want to fuck each other at this point because you're making out and it's all hot and heavy and you're going to be like, Dr. Allie said we can't do it.
totally, totally,
Ah!
right. And they'll
But
come to me and they'll say, "Oh, we had sex," and I'm like, "Great, that's awesome." It's never like I'm punishing you because you did the thing you weren't supposed to do, but it's just a little bit of reverse psychology and it creates a little
I
spaciousness. And
love
so,
that.
how much can the higher libido partner really think about creating conditions that are conducive to feeling pleasure, to feeling connection, and to reducing pressure and the shoulds. The shoulds are not sexy. That meaning like I should feel this way or I should do this thing or oh God, that's just such a libido buzzkill for almost everybody, right?
Yes.
Um, and just one other thing what I'll say is finding other ways, not just other sexual ways like self-pleasure, but other ways to find your release. So I was working with a couple and he had much much higher libido and we kind of discovered that for him it was a huge tension release and so he started going to a kickboxing gym and doing like I don't know whatever
Hmm.
martial arts thing that he was doing and oh my God that was so effective and yes does he still want to have sex often with his partner yeah but it doesn't feel like it's this need where if he doesn't do it he feels like he's going crazy.
I love that because I feel that in my body. Like I have to move and or run or do something to get all the energy out. One last quick question on this topic, and then I have one more I want to bring you into before we close.
Okay.
But do you ever find with couples when we're having this conversation where we're like, take care of yourself? Have you ever run into, or do you ever run into situations with couples where maybe one is like, I don't want you to go do that. Like, you don't need to be masturbating without me here. Don't be looking at porn. Don't be like, do you ever find that, or are most of your couples, free and open and like, yes, please, God, go release yourself?
No, I find that all the time,
Do
all
you?
the time. And I think and I also find the opposite, which was like, oh, please just go masturbate and take care of yourself, right? Which also isn't effective because there's a bit of a shaming, distancing. If you
Hmm.
can't see the video, I'm kind of like pushing my hand away because that's energetically what it feels like is you go do that thing over there,
Yeah,
which isn't going to be fulfilling or nourishing for that person either. And
right.
so it's how much can you make space to invite that in to realize that's a great way to not have to be responsible for their pleasure all the time. One thing that I'll encourage some clients to do is like, okay, this person with a high libido wants to masturbate. What, if any, ways do you want to be involved that do feel good? Maybe I'll hold you from behind, or I'll whisper sweet or sexy things in your ear, or I'll read erotica to you, or I'm
Mm.
going to take a really slow shower and leave the door open and you can watch me, or whatever it is, so that it's like I'm actually staying true to myself for what I'm available for, but I'm participating in a way that does feel authentic and it's not shaming for you. You don't have to hide it. And it reframes how we're relating to this idea of masturbation because so many of us have really young childhood shaming experiences that inform how we relate to either ourselves masturbating or our partners masturbating.
You have so many really hot, sexy ideas. I love the idea of being like, you have permission to watch me in the shower. I'm going to leave it open for you, but you can't touch. So do
Hmm.
whatever you want with that. That's fun.
Yeah, and then like when I've done that, like I notice I take showers differently
I
and I'm
bet.
actually connecting with myself in a different way, which is really fun and empowering too. Now, that might feel performative for some people and not work for them. There's
Yes.
not one right answer. It's about finding what does work for you.
I love that. Okay. So the last question I want to ask you, because this is a podcast on open relationships, is if you are partnered to someone who's decided they want to become or be, or they are asexual, or they, I don't know, have decided they're taking sex off the table. I know we've talked about Jaya a lot. I just saw recently that she's had an entire year of celibacy. And I know she's not only married, but has multiple partners. So I'm curious how that worked out. But if you're partnered to that or with that, or let's just say you are having sex with your partner and they're in fucking insatiable and you're like, I can't take, like, I can't, I just can't. At what point do you have a conversation around like maybe we should have some sort of an open relationship, or what might it look like if we invited in another partner for you, or
Yes.
the person with the low libido might be like, you know what, let's go spice some shit up and let's go check out a sex club. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I will often introduce non-monogamy as a potential option for couples in mixed or mismatched libido dynamics. And sometimes that's something that they're open exploring, and sometimes it's not. I think that it can be a really good way to have the lower libido person not feel responsible or to just to really truly get to own and honor where they're at. And sometimes actually the E&M makes the lower libido person have higher libido because they see their partner being desired and they feel a little bit of like the insecure attachment, right? One of the reasons why some people have a higher libido, not everybody, but some people is because they have more of an anxious attachment system and the sex is a way for them to feel secure and close to their partner. So sometimes E&M shakes things up in a way where now it's like, oh, I see you in a new light. I want to I feel more invested in investing in our intimacy because um, maybe it's a little competition or a little jealousy or a little whatever it is, actually feeds the dynamic. Not always, but often. Or I work with a lot of couples where they want to stay together because they co-parent or they love each other, they have a great relationship, but they want to have either a platonic marriage or a mostly platonic marriage. And so yeah, E&M, maybe it's even monopoly. One of them is non-monogamous, one of them isn't, and that actually works incredibly well for them. Um, so there's also so many ways to do non-monogamy, and I do think that it's something to include as an option. When I'm working with couples who are in this dynamic, in the beginning of our work, I'll say there's so many options of what this could look like. You may end up deciding that you're not compatible. We're not there yet. There's so many things to look at and to try before we get there. But let's just acknowledge that that's an option here. You may decide that like there's ways that you can explore intimacy with each other that you didn't even know were possible. And you find that there's more compatibility than you ever imagined. You may explore non-monogamy and see how you can outsource some of those needs so that there's less pressure in this relationship. It can look like a combination of that. And to just put all the options on the table because I think that that can um, actually be really relieving to just talk about it, to name the elephant in the room, and to be able to have these open dialogues, oftentimes in dynamics where that dialogue has been really shut down.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, guys, if you're listening and you're like, I need more Dr. Ali, like my mind feels blown open and I don't even know what to do with all of this, or I'm having some definite, mismatched libido issues or sexual issues within my own relationship, and I want her to coach me. I want to be a part of things. I know that she's got a couple programs that are about to open. And so, Dr. Ali, if you would just tell us what's available for people to sign up to.
Totally. So I work with individuals, couples, and polycules in my coaching practice. So you can always reach out to me through my website. Also, I have some other coaches on my team, including my husband, for complimentary consultations. I have a course for couples that I've created and teach with my husband called Sustainable Intimacy. And it's all about how do you keep the spark alive in long-term relationships? How do you address more responsive desire? How do you remove the libido blockers and create more conditions for pleasure? This course is available as an on-demand rental, and then we also teach it a couple times throughout the year, oftentimes as a retreat, but in other formats as well. So you can get it anytime, or if you want the in-person option, reach out for that. We'll likely be doing a retreat in the spring. And then I also have this course that I teach every year. It's a 2-month course. I do it in January, February, and March, called Sexual and Emotional Intimacy Skills. This course is available for individuals and couples, and I teach tons of skills that are so valuable for having healthy emotional and sexual intimacy. We do talk about mismatched libidos and how to create intimacy in long-term relationships, but we talk about so much more. All sorts of things around embodiment and boundaries and emotional safety and depth and attunement and flirting and seduction, which, by the way, is super important in long-term relationships. And how do we navigate conflict? And a lot of this is about how do we address some of those libido blockers in a skills-based way and reconnect with our partner in a more holistic way, so that I can feel more equipped and confident. This is also great for single people who want to focus on the skills that are going to help them have the kind of relationship that they're looking for. And so right now there's super early bird tickets on sale. You get $200 to $400 off. And if you happen to be listening to this and the recording maybe, months down the line and it's not available, I do offer it as also an on-demand course rental when I'm not offering it live. And all of that you can find, as well as tons of on-demand workshops that you can rent. I've got over 20 different offerings at my website, which is turnon.love.
Yeah, I featured last year. There's this on-demand class she has called How to Eat Pussy Like a Champ. Do you remember
Oh,
that?
yeah.
Oh yeah, and there's some really hot pictures of her. It's kind of fun. So anyway, I don't mean in like a gross way. I like just for your marketing was fun. Anyway, okay. So if you wanted to just say some last words to tie this up with a nice bow about mismatched libidos, what do you want to leave our listeners with?
You're not broken. Shame is this belief that something is wrong with me. And whether you feel shame because you have a really high libido or you feel shame because you have a lower libido, you're not broken. So much of this is normal. So much of this is the momentum that our society has created for us. And there is so much movement that's possible if you want it. And so I don't want you to feel like this is just how things are, this is how things will always be, but also permission for you to be exactly how you are.
Perfect. All right, guys, I want you to stop, go to the links below, follow Dr. Ali, maybe sign up for a class if you feel like you need that. And Dr. Ali, we'll see you again. It sounds like we have lots of things that we need to talk about, so we'll have to have you come back on.
I would love that. We've got some juicy seeds planted.
Sounds good.
Thank you for listening to the Open Bedroom Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, go ahead and give us a like and click subscribe below and stay up to date on all the new episodes that we release. If you have a topic that you'd really like more information on, leave us a comment below and we'll see what we can do. Feel free to share this podcast with all of your friends and especially your partners. This is a great way to open up some amazing conversations. We'll see you next week.